You wake up at dawn, walk out to the barn with the morning chill on your face, swing open the doors, and expect to hear that active hum from your flock. You check the collection trays under the cages looking for that speckled harvest that pays the bills, but there is nothing. The trays sit empty, your quail stopped laying eggs, and the profitability clock starts ticking against you. Every ounce of feed they consume without returning an egg is money vanishing from your pocket. This isn't bad luck, and it's not the weather working against you. It's pure biology reacting to a flawed management strategy. Today we're going straight to the root and breaking down what physiological process is failing in your breeding setup. I'll show you how to read your bird's behavior to anticipate the drop in production, and, most importantly, how to jumpstart that laying cycle with precise field adjustments. Let's begin. The most common and expensive mistake in the quail breeding world stems from trying to save a few bucks at the feed store. Many producers cut expenses by grabbing generic chicken layer mash, believing all birds are identical. That standard ration averages around 16% protein. Feeding your quail that mix is a huge mistake. This bird operates like a high-compression engine. It runs at a blistering pace and demands premium fuel. To keep the egg-laying powerhouse running without a break, a quail needs a protein level locked in between 20 and 22%. When you offer a deficient feed, the bird attempts to compensate for the shortage by consuming a much larger volume. She spends the entire day with her beak buried in the trough, hunting for vital amino acids missing from the blend. A quail's digestive tract is short and processes feed extremely fast. Food moves from the crop to the gizzard, gets pulverized fast, and then the intestines absorb the nutrients in record time. If you use standard chicken ration, the amino acid density is just too low. The bird feels the deficit in her bloodstream and enters an absolute feeding frenzy. She pecks the feeders without a pause, scratching and wasting feed on the floor, trying to find morsels with a better nutritional payload. The excess carbs from that low-protein diet turn straight into belly fat. A fat quail suffers a mechanical roadblock in her reproductive tract. The fat suffocates the follicles and blocks ovulation. You end up buying more feed to fatten animals that should be churning out eggs. Mixing a specific ration, blending in soybean meal, fish meal, and synthetic amino acids like methionine and lysine stops this money drain. It guarantees every ounce of feed ingested goes into egg production. These birds have a blazing fast metabolism that generates a ton of internal heat, making high barn temperatures a massive risk. Quail don't have sweat glands. Their sole mechanism to shed heat is through constant panting, evaporating moisture straight from their respiratory tract. They have zero tolerance for heat stress. When the barn thermometer pushes past 86 degrees, the bird goes into pure survival mode. The body prioritizes survival over any other biological function. Blood abandons the reproductive tract and rushes toward the legs, the skin, and the lungs in a desperate bid to cool the organism. In that exact instant, egg formation halts to a dead stop. The bird won't spend her valuable caloric energy and liquid reserves on reproduction when she feels her life is in imminent danger. Barn design and water management play a critical role in this battle against the elements. Low metal roofs without thermal insulation act like giant radiators during peak midday sun, baking the trapped air inside the structure. The quail depends on the microclimate you build and a continuous fresh water supply. A quail egg consists of over 70% water. If your reserve tanks sit exposed to the blazing sun and the water inside the PVC lines gets hot, the bird will outright reject the liquid. Worse yet, if a blockage occurs in the nipple drinkers and the flock goes without water for a window of just 2 hours, disaster is guaranteed. The blood thickens, the brain orders the reabsorption of developing follicles to reclaim lost fluids. A simple 2-hour failure in hydration will cut your egg production dead for the following week. Securing fresh, shaded water with an uninterrupted flow is your absolute best defense to prevent this productive collapse during the peak heat of summer. Once you conquer the climate challenge, we've got to pay attention to natural sunlight and understand the bird's internal biological clock. A quail's eye functions as a direct light sensor. Light photons travel right through the skull and stimulate the pineal gland, the command center of the endocrine system. This gland measures the length of the day to figure out what season the flock is experiencing. If the bird receives less than 14 hours of daylight, the brain interprets that autumn has arrived and winter is closing in. Out in the wild, winter brings freezing temperatures and food scarcity, which is a terrible time to try and raise chicks. As a built-in defense mechanism, the system shuts down the egg factory. The oviduct shrinks, and the bird goes into a reproductive pause to protect her limited body reserves against changing seasons. To keep production maxed out all year long, the farmer must hijack this natural cycle. You need to provide between 14 and 16 hours of continuous light every single day. Rigging LED bulbs above the cages works, but intensity follows strict rules. A dim center bulb doesn't cut it. The illumination must reach all levels of the cages with absolute uniformity. If the quail on the bottom tier sit in the shadows, their pineal gland will miss the proper stimulus, and only the top floors will maintain their laying rhythm. The ideal brightness requires enough light for you to read a newspaper inside the barn without straining your eyes. Plus, running an automatic timer is mandatory. Flipping the lights on and off by hand at irregular times will cause absolute hormonal chaos. The timer ensures the sun rises and sets at the exact same time day after day, tricking their bodies into thinking it's an eternal spring on your farm. All this biological machinery requires heavy raw materials to build the final product. The egg demands a solid structural support, and that's where calcium comes into play. Building a perfect shell every 24 hours requires a massive extraction of calcium carbonate from the bloodstream straight into the shell gland during the dark hours of the night. If the feed lacks the right mineral balance, the bird resorts to an extreme contingency plan. She'll pull the calcium right out of her own medullary bones. The skeleton weakens. The legs become fragile, losing their grip strength on the wire. Soon enough, physical failures start happening on the assembly line. The first symptom is egg binding. The oviduct, lacking proper muscle tone from the calcium deficit, fails to expel the egg. The bird strains hard to push it out, suffers a prolapsed vent, and dies right there in the cage within a matter of hours. The second symptom will ruin your operation over the long haul. The bird manages to expel the egg, but it drops with a soft shell, as fragile as a water balloon. Hitting the wire floor of the cage, that outer membrane tears wide open. The yellow, fat-rich yolk spills all over the mesh. Quail are born scavengers. One pecks the spill and discovers a dense protein source. In that moment, a nightmare breaks loose in the barn. The bird develops the vice of eating her own eggs. By the next day, she'll stand waiting by her cagemate's vent to attack the egg the second it drops. The others watch the behavior and mimic it out of pure instinct. This destructive habit spreads fast across the flock. You look at the empty collection trays thinking your bird stopped laying, when in reality this egg-eating vice is destroying your profitability. Preventing this untreatable vice requires blending coarse oyster shell particles into the diet, ensuring a slow nighttime calcium release to protect shell integrity. Flock balance demands a deep understanding of the raw animal behavior driving your setup. Many seasoned producers make the rookie mistake of cramming too many males inside the cages, holding on to the false belief that more roosters guarantee better egg fertility. That practice unleashes a relentless nightmare of continuous harassment on the wire. The male grabs the hen by the head feathers, pinning her against the floor with raw physical force and zero courtship. Multiply that aggressive action by 5 or 6 males sharing a tight space, and it turns into absolute chaos. The hens lose their skull plumage, leaving them exposed to severe flesh wounds and open sores. The physical stress and non-stop harassment ruin the flock's welfare and keep the birds on edge. The hen's body reacts to this stress by dumping torrents of cortisol straight into her bloodstream. This stress hormone completely shuts down the reproductive system. The quail brain interprets the harassment as a direct death threat, ordering the body to shut down ovulation so she can focus all her metabolic energy on pure evasion and survival. You end up with terrified, exhausted birds with torn backs, consuming expensive feed without returning a single egg to the collection tray. Restoring peace requires enforcing an unbreakable golden rule in your breeding setup. The exact ratio to maintain a stable, productive environment stands at 1 male for every 3 or 4 hens. Pushing numbers past that ratio guarantees heavy financial losses. When you pull the excess males, you notice a behavioral shift in a matter of hours. The hens return to the feeders with calm confidence, reclaim their vital space, and their stress levels drop to 0. Cortisol leaves the bloodstream, allowing reproductive hormones to take back control of the bird's internal machinery. It's a simple management adjustment that costs nothing and unlocks egg production right on the spot. Select vigorous flock sires with a strong crow, a broad chest, and brilliant plumage, and cull the rest for meat. Your core goal centers on raising high-yield layers and maximizing the daily harvest, not maintaining an arena of territorial disputes and exhaustion inside your own barn. Nature doesn't care about your schedule, and an aging flock will drain your wallet fast. After months of peak production, physical wear and tear takes a heavy toll on the body. The molting phase arrives, a natural biological reset that drains every ounce of energy from the bird. The quail stops laying overnight. You just can't negotiate with a bird's biology. To form the quill and barbs of a single new feather, the quail diverts high-value essential amino acids, like cysteine and methionine, straight to the skin follicles. The reproductive tract goes dormant, stripped bare of the chemical building blocks needed to structure the egg white. During this molting window, the bird eats with the exact same ravenous appetite to sustain the regeneration of her plumage, but your egg harvest crashes to zero. You're financing a molt, not a commercial egg operation. Many beginner breeders fail by keeping birds in this state for weeks, waiting for a biological turnaround that takes way too long to show up. The key to a competitive poultry setup relies on constant monitoring and ruthless culling without emotional attachments. Spotting an unproductive quail requires a sharp eye. A bird crossing the 18-month mark has finished her cycle of maximum utility. Her feed conversion rate collapses, and production volume drops off a cliff. The few eggs she does push out feature porous shells due to the total exhaustion of her bone calcium reserves. Keeping these cull birds means wasting premium concentrated feed on animals that no longer justify their floor space on the farm. Replacing those old birds with young pullets who have their best laying days ahead of them keeps your operation profitable. A smart breeder schedules replacement hatches months in advance in the brooders, guaranteeing a steady production flow. When one flock hits the production wall, the next generation must stand ready to occupy the cages and keep the cash flow moving without seasonal interruptions. Every single cage inside the barn must operate as an unstoppable engine of production. The sun sets, you flip off the barn lights, and you trust your birds are resting to form tomorrow's egg, but the darkness hides dangers that devastate production in total silence. The quail keeps her sharp prey instinct intact, an inheritance from her wild ancestors who slept on the ground under constant threat. Her genetic code keeps her on perpetual high alert. While you sleep, the breeding room can morph into a scene of absolute terror. Rats sneaking in to steal feed, a cat pacing on the metal roof, or a sudden crack of thunder can spark massive panic in the barn. A single out-of-place noise, a strange shadow crossing the dim barn, triggers an uncontrollable mass fright. The birds react with an explosive vertical leap. They smash their heads against the wire ceiling of the cage in a blind attempt to take flight and escape the claws of an unseen killer. Smashing into that heavy wire causes head trauma, eye injuries, and even broken necks, leaving you with immediate casualties in the flock. But the internal biological damage halts your profitability cold. The adrenal gland pumps toxic levels of adrenaline into the system. The smooth muscle of the oviduct suffers violent spasms, and follicular development shuts down from the shock. The next morning you find the hens pacing with nervous energy, huddled in the back of the cage staring at empty egg rollouts. Regaining the trust of the flock and stabilizing the hormonal cycle costs entire days of lost production. Securing the barn is just part of your job as a producer. Sealing the ventilation gaps with heavy-gauge hardware cloth stops hungry rodents in their tracks. Keeping a perimeter free of tall weeds prevents predators from establishing their hunting grounds near your setup. To mitigate the shock of sudden loud noises, leave a radio running at a low volume or keep a dim nightlight shining, breaking the pitch-black darkness and reducing their sensory spikes at the slightest midnight sound. Sometimes a drop in production comes down to something microscopic, a silent problem that eats away at your profits piece by piece. We're talking about the plague of avian mites and lice. These ectoparasites evade the sunlight, hiding deep inside the wood joints, the rusted metal crevices, and the base of the tube feeders. The red poultry mite hatches and reaches reproductive maturity in less than a week under warm barn temperatures. A minor infestation turns into a massive invasion long before you spot the first external symptoms. As night falls, these blood-feeding parasites travel from their hiding spots straight toward the motionless body of the sleeping quail. They cluster under the wings, at the base of the neck, and around the vent, piercing the skin with their jaws to feed right out of the veins of the bird. Blood is what carries vital nutrients, fats, and calcium straight to the reproductive tract. It's also the fluid responsible for maintaining the internal temperature of a high-metabolism animal. By losing blood volume on a continuous loop, the quail suffers a dramatic crash in her caloric energy. Without that essential energy, ovulation simply can't happen. The infested bird wakes up lethargic, showing dull plumage, pale wattles, and a dry beak. She spends most of the day rubbing against the cage bars, consumed by the irritation. Severe anemia halts egg formation and weakens the immune system against respiratory pathogens. This is a red alert emergency requiring immediate action on your part. Walk out to the barn today, pull random birds from different cages, flip them over under a bright light, and inspect the skin right under their wings. If you spot tiny dark specks crawling over inflamed red skin, take immediate action. Apply targeted sanitary treatments and do a deep clean of every single crack in the breeding structure to eradicate the bugs. The collapse of egg production is never just bad luck. As we saw today, sustained yields demand complete control over your environment, from precise feed formulation to the ruthless elimination of predators and parasites. Understanding the biology of your flock gives you the power to anticipate problems before you lose money. transforming simple cages into maximum efficiency units. Let me know down in the comments which of these management factors requires the most work in your setup. If you got some value out of this breakdown, hit that subscribe button and give the video a thumbs up so we can keep bringing you practical homesteading advice. To your success, fellow breeder. Until next time.